So is the new Scott Pilgrim anime trash? And we're going to talk about it because I've just finished watching all 8 episodes of the new Scott Pilgrim Takes Off anime. Why is it called Scott Pilgrim Takes Off? I don't even know, because when it was announced, as far as I know, it was just called Scott Pilgrim, like maybe versus the world, the anime. I don't know. It's one of these weird things. I didn't even know it was called that. So I've made some notes. We're going to go through them. I'm going to do episode by episode. There is going to be spoilers in this because I don't really know how else to talk about the about 4 hours of content that I just watched. And first of all, I'm going to go over my thoughts on this, like what I thought Scott Pilgrim the anime would be. All I thought it would be was, I thought it was 8 episodes. I thought we're going to have like a setup episode, then each week is going to be like boyfriend of the week. But then I remembered 2 of them are twins, so I don't know how that would work. But I thought that's how it would go. Like, we killed this one, we killed this one, we've done this one, we've done this one. That'd be it, wash and dry. That's the anime. But it's got a bit different than that. We start off with Scott and like his bandmates, kind of like the movie. They're practicing, we see knives. And one thing I want to bring up first is I feel like they were listening to me as I was watching the show and making in real life time edits. One of the main things I hated to begin with, it didn't really seem to happen so much in the later episodes, was this blur effect. It'd be like, so if this was in focus, if this person was talking, this would be in focus and the background would be out like a bokeh blur effect. It just looked weird for like an animated thing. It was like too harsh, I think, the effect. But it didn't really seem to happen outside of episode 1. One of the other things that I liked that they changed later on was in the beginning episode, Knives like had emotion, like she was reacting to seeing them play for the first time. And she had no emotion, like, really, in the first episode. There was like obviously there was audio, but there's like, it's anime, let's make it anime style emotion. You know what I mean? So that actually happens later on. So I feel like 2 of my main complaints with the first episode already got corrected later on. So I don't know what that first episode even was, considering they dropped the whole thing at once. So one of the other things, talking about like the blur and everything, was how like many angles there were. There's tons of angles, and I really love seeing that in anime, because a lot of times in anime you get a lot of stills and things just because every frame costs money to create. So like, there's obviously a lot of money being put into it. Not to mention that the whole like star-studded cast, because some of these actors are a lot more popular now than when they were in the original Scott Pilgrim movie, and it just kind of shows that they love working on this property. So that was really good to see, and it was nice to see all the original voices. I think most of the original voices were there, like Michael, Sarah, and Brie Larson, and like Audrey Plaza, and like a few other big names like Chris Evans was in it, and that's good to see. All the comic book and video game styles, like effects, are still there, which I really do like. And one of the big spoilers for episode 1, Scott Pilgrim dies. But not kidding, not really. It changes later on. Whoa, we got you. And another thing I'm going to say that might kind of bloody annoy some of you is the OP is kind of mid. It's not the best. It won't be going on my Spotify playlist anytime soon. I won't be really rewatching it. The visuals cool. There's nothing really to complain about. It's alright. It's just a bit boring. It's like, especially if you've heard it 8 times in a row, it's like, I'm getting a bit tired of this now. So yeah. So one of the other things that we see in episode 1 is the Evil X's lair, and it's run by Gideon. And that's kind of cool to see. It's all like these multi-monitors. Looks like a bat cave on steroids. It looks really cool. And it's all in like red for evil. We've got the green lighting going on here because it's good. And then episode 2 opens with the funeral scene, and Envy Adams, Scott's ex-girlfriend, is there. And she does like some song at his funeral for some reason, which I thought was rather a weird take to do this, but yeah, they added it. It was decent. Then we find out that all the Evil X's have been invited to the Evil X lair, and it wasn't actually done by Gideon, who runs the lair. It's actually done by Matthew. I forgot to say that Matthew and Scott actually dies. Scott dies in a fight with Matthew, like in the movie. Instead of beating Matthew, he actually dies. So that's what happens there. And basically, and then Matthew and Gideon get in a fight to take over Gideon's empire of like his music stuff and all that, and take control of the legal evil X's, which is where we got. There's some pretty good animation during this fight scene in episode 2. It starts off as like a 2D fighting game, a bit like Street Fighter, and then it goes into a 3D brawl. Like, they pull out weapons, they go through different levels in the building, like sideways and crossways. It proper got tons of detail and animation in there. And that's pretty much all that happens in episode 2. The only other notable thing will be that Scott is in Ramona's dreams, and that kind of gives her the indication that he's not actually dead. He's somewhere else. He's trying to communicate to tell her, look, I'm not dead. Help me. If you get what I mean. So episode 3 comes around, and one thing I do want to say is I appreciate them keeping the vibe of from the original movie, like the mid to late 2000s, like flip phones, video rental services. Like they mention Netflix, but like early Netflix on its delivery DVD service. I always find out that young Neil may or may not have written a movie script about Scott's life, like his fight with Matthew and that. I don't know why, but yeah. And also every episode seems to start, or near the start of every episode, Ramona changes the colour of her hair. It's like the same animation, they just reused and changed the colouring each time. I don't really know why they did that, but one thing I thought was, does that mean that every time that happens there's like a week and a half difference? Because I believe that's what she said in the original movie, that's how often she changed the colour of her hair. I don't know how true that is. That might be something factually you might want to know for going into this. So Ramona's looking more into who kidnapped Scott, and she's doing some investigating, talking to different people, and she sits down, like writes a list, and she goes and talks to one of the people that Scott has known the longest in his life, and it turns out that is Kim, because Kim and Scott had a relationship, and it goes a bit back into that story. I kind of like this with this TV show. It fills in more gaps than the movie did, because obviously it's got about a 4-hour runtime, give or take some, and obviously that gives it more time to fill out the story and how these characters all know each other. Then Roxy, the female one of Ramona's evil exes, shows up to this video store where they're talking, and they have a fight and brawl it out and basically become friends by the end. But one of the cool things about this fight scene in particular is because in a movie store they like fight into films, and it's like all these different like genres. So like a film noir one, and we've got one that's like a samurai-esque film, and we've got like a western type scene. It's all very cool animation. I really did appreciate that one. And then another thing is, noticing that I was watching this movie, there's this little robot that keeps showing up. He kind of does my head in, but it all comes clear at the end of the episode, like the end of the series, who that thing is, why it's there and everything. But yeah, you're going to notice this little robot hanging around through the episodes. So when we move on to episode 4, we're introduced to Lucas, who is number 2 of the evil exes. He gets a cool little montage scene where he's like skating through Hollywood. That is a pretty cool scene to me. And we find out young Neil is actually producing this movie that he may or may not have wrote the script for, about Scott's life. And Lucas actually gets cast to play Scott Pilgrim in this movie, which is even weirder to me. But the cool thing about that scene is, well, like several of them scenes, is they use the set pieces are actually the scenes from the earlier film. The earlier bits of the TV show. Like, everything looks the same. It's like they copied and pasted. But I kind of like that in a way. There's also this piece where Neil shows Ramona around the movie a lot, and there's all these different film references to like Jurassic Park. I'm going blank on some of the others, but there's basically a lot of like things like that. And I also think Hot Fuzz in a way as well. I think because obviously Edgar Wright is some sort of producer on this film. He's got his hand in there, and there is a character called Edgar Wrong, which is very good. And old Tim, I don't know if he voice acts that character or not. I should have actually looked into that first. But yeah, that's a cool little tidbit, like little Easter egg part that I quite like about this series. I also love how they're pressing this, because obviously some of these people in the X's and that as like celebrities like Lucas, and the press is actually represented as ninjas. I think that's really cool. Basically, a scene where Lucas is no longer going to be in the film, and he ends up fighting all these paparazzi ninjas. I quite like that. And then we end the episode with Todd showing up. That's the third vegan evil ex. And yeah, that's on to episode 5. So episode 5 opens with this like documentary style. It's talking to people like young Neil, Ramona, and that about the production of the Scott Pilgrim in-world movie, which it's a pretty cool, at least, like little thing to add. We also find out that Ramona has to become a stunt double for Envy, who is actually playing Ramona in the movie, to get closer to Todd so she can ask him about this vegan portal because it looks like one of those. And once she finally gets close enough to Todd, she finds out that his like vegan powers aren't strong enough to produce a portal like that. And we also see Todd and Wallace have a relationship, like a fling on set, and it kind of makes Todd not become a vegan anymore. He's just like comfort eating like non-vegan foods. It's kind of funny. It's pretty good. And then now, because Matthew controls all of like Gideon's movie empire, he's the one that's funding this Scott Pilgrim movie. He's come to shut it down because it's a character assassination of his character. And by the end of this episode, I'm starting to feel a little bit bored of the show. So one thing I forgot to mention at the end of episode 5 is that Matthew tells Ramona that Gideon and Julia are hanging out, or Julie, I don't know what name is, I can't remember, are hanging out together, and she's off to go and see them. So when episode 6 starts, it's kind of a bit weird. I thought I was watching a different show. I thought maybe I sat on the remote, maybe Netflix was playing a little glitch, maybe someone's having a little jokeroo with me. But no, chat, it didn't happen like that. They started playing some bloody anime, stereotypical cliche anime thing. Right at the beginning, schoolgirl room with the toast in her mouth. What was going on? What's going on over there at the Scott Pilgrim production team that they want to make some anime? Why, I don't know. We get past that, I figure I'm still watching the same TV show. I didn't doze off of boredom from episode 5 ending, so yeah. So it turns out Lucas and Gideon have become friends after they've both lost everything. They kind of have a little fun montage, build a skate ramp, and have some fun in Julie's house. Apparently she only left him alone for 90 minutes and it went haywire. Looks like they had a good time. In this episode, we see the Knives character become deeper. I really like that because I feel like she didn't get enough time or character development in the movie. I've never read the books of Scott Pilgrim. I should have probably said that before. Maybe all this happens in the books. I don't know. But her character gets a bit more developed. We find out a little bit more about her. And the emotions are back, which I like from that character. So along with this, we get the Julie and Gideon backstory, basically where they started, where Gideon came from, and how he became the man he is today. And yeah, that's kind of cool. Like I said, once again, filling in the backstories. I love it with this show because it builds on the characters that we already know and love. And it also turns out that Gideon is just like us. He's a literally me character, and at the moment he's just sitting back on the couch watching anime, and he's not going to hurt anybody. So we think. And it turns out he's actually planning a plan to get his empire back. He's not just a weeb sitting there watching the new episodes of his slice of life Toast Girl anime like we all do every season. And they find out that the Evil X twins could be the ones who could have made the robot. And the gang gets together and discusses like who done it, to like who's next, Scott and everything. And then right at the end of that episode, Scott returns. Dun, 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 dun. He returns. It's like, what? Why? You gotta watch episode 7 to find out. So that's what I did. I watched episode 7. And I found out that who kidnapped Scott, who took Scott through the pole, it was none other than older Scott. I was not expecting this. I didn't watch any trailers or anything coming up to this show. I want to know as little as possible. All I wanted to know was I wanted to watch it. And I did just that. So I didn't know that older Scott had future Scott, or I'm going to call him old Scott, come to get young Scott through and basically bring into the future. They do a lot of different things. We see a rather run down Ontario, along with 2 scenes, or like 2 places, should I say, from the first movie. Well, one's like Wallace's house and the other one's like the park. But if you remember the park from like the first day, I can't remember if that was in the TV show or not, but definitely in the film. Definitely in the film, I remember that scene. And they go through and there's this VR scene. It's pretty cool. It's like an old Virtual Boy, but it's like new things, and it shows Scott what happened between him and Ramona and how they ended up in a divorce somehow. And Scott hasn't really gotten over that fact. And that's kind of an emotional high for this show, because really there's not a lot of build-up, I would say, in the emotions department up to this scene where you find out like it didn't end how you thought it would end for those two. But that's just how it goes sometimes. And we also find out that young Scott meets old Ramona, And we find out that Ramona actually wrote the script that young Neil's making into a film because Scott wouldn't read a book, but he would watch a film. It's a bit it's a bit convoluted and hard to follow all these different lines and stuff for this, but that was the reasoning behind that. And Scott eventually explains to old Scott, or Ramona, I can't remember now, Ramona, but basically all the work that she's done up to now, trying to find where Scott went and who took him and everything, proves how much that she loves Scott and how much Scott loves her. But then they find out they can't kiss for some reason, like some sort of force field. Like they go bang, bang, and there's no explanation for it until you watch the next episode. Duh. And I think all the evil exes must be defeated because they've got to think like the first film. Got to defeat all the evil exes, then this kissing force field will disappear, but that's not the case. So we go into episode 8, the last episode of the Scott Pilgrim anime. And he's actually ready to fight all these evil exes, but no one actually wants to fight because along the way they've all kind of made up. Mostly Ramona spoke to them all and everything like that. And they just don't want to fight, so they can't really understand what's going on until the musical happens. That kind of goes back and forth. And then they're all teleported. All the evil exes, Scott and Ramona, are teleported into this world where there is an even older Scott. There is a 47-year-old Scott, who has become a gym bro for the last 10 years. And because now he's a gym bro, he wants to destroy the world, and that's why he did it. Because of, like, this divorce thing. And it just had me think when I was watching it, I was thinking, oh, maybe this is like the Joker movie. I think it's the Joker. It's like, if you live long enough, you'll see yourself become the villain. And I think that's kind of what happens here with this scene. And basically we start like a brawl scene. Everyone gets like unique weapons and everything. It's pretty cool. Against even older Scott, then even older Ramona turns up. And they kind of have a conversation. It's like, you didn't even text me in 10 years. Like, what's going on? Basically, Scott just thought the whole world was like gone. And he just didn't communicate to solve his problems. But then Ramona also looks back and reflects on herself when they merge together. Because old Ramona, even older Ramona and young Ramona merge together, and she finds out that all along she's been running away from things instead of trying to fix them herself. And I think the message here was that the past doesn't define the future you, which was kind of cool. And Scott wants them to like basically work on each other. Scott's got issues, and put it together, they'll be like whole, if you will. They come back to the musical theatre, they're happy again, and we end with some brief scenes of where our characters are after these journeys. Lucas is now like a cool barista, band now has knives in it, and there's some other scenes like that. Then the last scene, you gotta watch the credits, because Marvel movies have all conditioned us. There is a post-credit sequence. You can't just cut to black and end a thing anymore. Gotta do a few credits first, get a few of the big names out of the way. Then we put a scene in. And what was that scene? I think that scene was for season 2. We're back at the Evil Exes Empire thing room, Batcave on steroids, and I think that's what we're going for. Second season, I don't know. I personally don't think this needs a second season. I think sometimes we could try it, but I don't know if it needs a second season. I think a lot of times things don't need sequels, and I don't think this is one of them. I think if anything, you could have maybe cut an episode's worth of content out of this and condensed it down to 7, maybe even 6 episodes. Cool story, cool ideas. I did like it, I enjoyed it, but I did have to take a break because it did get a bit boring. Maybe it's me just trying to watch the whole thing in one sitting. To do this review, I'm already a few days late and a few books short. It was pretty good. I don't know if I'd be able to give this a rating. I'd maybe give this like a 7 out of 10. If you're a fan of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, I definitely recommend it. I don't recommend it if you haven't seen the movie first, or maybe read the comics or something first. I feel like I need to read the comics now just to complete everything. You know what I mean? But I've had them before, just never got around to reading them. But yeah, I recommend it if you like the show. I kind of maybe recommend it if you don't like the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, definitely don't watch it if you don't like the movie. I don't think it's for you. But yeah, on to next time, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you next time.